Jonathan Fung. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy here, and also one of the organizers of this series. And on behalf of the Office of the Chancellor and the Campus Climate Council, it's my great honor to welcome you to What Matters to Me and Why at UC Irvine. This year at UCI, as you all know, is our 50th anniversary with lots of celebrations. And so it's a great pleasure to welcome our speaker today, who is one of the founding faculty members of UCI. You'll hear a lot more about him in a second, but let me just say a few words about the series, because this is the first one we have this year. So what matters to me here is entering its 4th season, and the idea behind this is very simple, is to give us all a chance to hear from each other on a personal level. So every month, 7 times a year, someone will stand up in front of us, staff or faculty member, someone who shapes the way UCI is today, and give us a short informal talk about what matters to them. And that will be followed by some ample time for question and answer. I recently went back to the first talk in this series, which occurred, 3 years ago, as I was really curious to see what I said back then. And luckily, the words still ring pretty true. So let me tell you some of what I said. These are not academic talks. PowerPoint is strongly discouraged, and that's still the case. Rather, this is a chance to talk about our values, beliefs, and motivations, and perhaps to share how these have been shaped by our personal journeys, including the difficulties encountered and joys revealed along the way. What might we gain from this? Well, probably there are many answers to this question, as many answers as there are people in this room. But some of our hopes are that we would draw inspiration from how others at UCI live out our core values. We would strengthen bonds between faculty, staff, and students who teach, learn, and work together here. And we would be able to celebrate both the diversity of this community on the one hand and the commonalities that bind us together. So now flash forward to today. We have now 21 fascinating talks online. I'd very much invite you to view them if you haven't been personally here at all of them. There are also spin-offs in the works. It's early days yet, but basically there are plans for a What Matters to Me and Why alumni series with alumni speaking, and also a student series with students speaking. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And of course, we still have the rest of this series this season. So just to remind you, they're held every month of the academic year except for December and June. That means there's one next month on the second Wednesday at lunchtime. Our whole season is set. We have a great lineup. So when you get the registration message in the email, very quickly sign yourself up. We typically fill up after about 24 hours, and make plans to come again. Our upcoming speaker is Daphne Lay from the School of the Arts. Will, I'm sure, give a great talk. She will not be speaking on the second Wednesday because that's Veterans Day, but the third Wednesday, so that's November 18th. So last, let me remind you that we want to be good stewards of this room. Please clean up after yourself at the end. Fill out your questionnaires. Hopefully you each got one. Tell us whether you like pizza or the traditional sandwiches we used to have. And turn them in. And finally, as our tradition here, let me invite you to say hello to your neighbor. We have a diverse group of faculty, staff, and students. So say hi to someone you don't know for a minute. And then I'll invite Doug Haynes to come up, Vice Provost and organizer, to introduce our speaker.
You really were listening to Jonathan, weren't you? May I have your attention? You're really taking this too seriously. My name is Doug Haynes. I'm one of the organizers of this wonderful campus event, and I'm a member of the Department of History. And I want to thank Jonathan and others on the steering committee for creating yet another sort of wonderful season for the campus. As Jonathan mentioned, this season of What Matters to Me and Why is special for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, it coincides with the 50th anniversary of UCI. What better way to mark the occasion of our bright past and brilliant future than to have a distinguished and esteemed colleague and member of the campus community reflect on what matters to James McGaugh. Many of you no doubt know Jim McGaugh. His accolades as a world-renowned neurobiologist are far too legion to mention. Nonetheless, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge his membership as a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, the most distinguished group for scholars in this country. In addition, he earned this designation for his significant and groundbreaking investigation into human learning and memory. And in 2001, he was also selected as a UCI medalist for his many contributions to the growth and development of the campus. For others, you may have watched his 2011 interview on 60 Minutes with correspondent Leslie Stahl on the phenomenon of endless memory or superior autobiographical memory. Still for others, students I suspect, it may be that the building in the biosciences cluster you entered or exited today or yesterday for a laboratory instruction or classroom lecture or graduate seminar is known as McGaugh Hall, named after Jim in 2001. Although our East Coast peers name buildings for the long departed, on the West Coast we honor the living with this distinction. Like all faculty at UCI, Jim has a history of what we call curriculum vitae. A California native, he completed his undergraduate degree in psychology at California State University, San Jose, where he graduated #1 in his class. Thereafter, he went up north to UC Berkeley, where he completed his PhD in physiological psychology. Before Jim joined UCI as a member of the founding faculty in the then Department of Physiobiology in 1964, he held faculty appointments at his alma mater, San Jose State, and later at the University of Oregon, where he was tenured. At UCI, he progressed rapidly through the ranks while expanding his affiliation with other academic departments, including psychiatry, pharmacology, and the social sciences. During this period, he also assumed leadership roles, including founding chair of the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior, dean of the School of Biological Sciences, vice chancellor of academic affairs, and executive vice chancellor. And finally, director of the Center of Neurobiology and Memory. That is a mouthful. So it's probably not advisable to complain about committee work or other assignments that you might have. But please join me in welcoming Jim McGaugh, our first speaker.
Thank you. I was very honored to be asked to speak here. I have no idea why you came. I thought on the way over here it might be that there would be a full house because it's kind of hot and it's air conditioned. And then I saw the food and I said, well, there's another reason that people will be here. So for those of you who came for some other reason, thank you very much for coming. And thank you for that extravagant introduction. I appreciate it. In January 1964, I received a phone call from somebody I didn't know, never heard of, named Edward Steinhaus. And Edward Steinhaus called to ask if I would be interested in being considered as the founding chair of a department that he named psychobiology here at UC Irvine. Now, at that time, I was very happily ensconced as a professor at the University of Oregon, had just built a brand new, beautiful home, and my children were all in school and everybody was happy. And so why would I even respond to the telephone call? But I did. And I decided to come here and meet Edward Steinhaus and learn what he had in mind. But that's not really why I came. I had been in California before for a long time, And I knew that in the late 1950s, the governor of the California and the regents of the University of California decided it was time to take a close look at the future of higher education in California, set up a study group, and the study group decided that it was important to build 3 brand new universities that would be expected to become other Berkeleys and other UCLAs. They did that because they thought it was time to invest in higher education in the state of California. Now, other states at that very period of time were converting existing university colleges into university. Arizona State University, for example, was Arizona State College, and before that, it was Arizona State Teachers College. Santa Barbara was Santa Barbara State College before it became the University of California. And UCLA initially was a southern branch of San Jose State Teachers College. That's how UCLA got started, a southern branch of San Jose State Teachers College, and it morphed eventually into UCLA. So what they did essentially was to upgrade institutions. They would upgrade them, rename them. But the wisdom of the governor and the regents was that it was time to develop de novo new universities as an investment. Now this is the theme of what I'm going to be talking about today, is higher education as an investment, not a cost, as an investment. Why is it an investment? Because we need an educated population to make decisions, to make the economy grow, and that's very important. And it's not a cost to do that, it's an investment because the payoff will be seen at a later time. And that's what they did. Very far thinking on the part of the leaders, the academic leaders and the government at that time. So I thought that it would be a good idea to take a look at the opportunity here, because the plan of this group was that we would be one of the world's greatest universities. After all, at that time, Berkeley was the #1 public university in the world and arguably equal to the best university in the United States. So why wouldn't I want to join that? So I left this wonderful job I had at the University of Oregon, where I had never even served on a committee. All they wanted me to do was to do research and teach whatever I wanted to teach. I mean, I had the dream job up there. So I came down here, and I was met by Edward Steinhaus. I flew in by helicopter. You probably don't know this, but at the Marriott down, I think it's a Marriott, down on the corner of PCH and Jamboree, where there are tennis courts, that was a heliport. And because there weren't any roads to get to Los Angeles at that time, you had to go up through Seal Beach on Highway 1. There was no 405, there was no 5, there was no 10, there was no 73, none of that. So rather than take a 3-hour drive up the coast, and one would take a helicopter. So he met me there, and he drove me over to the corner of Bison and MacArthur, which was appropriately named. You know why it was called Bison? Because there were bison. And that's pretty simple, isn't it? There were bison there. That was a bison ranch. And we stood there and looked over in this general area, and he said, now that's where the university is going to be. And I looked over there. I discovered weeks later I was even looking in the wrong direction. There was nothing to look at. There was nothing to look at. So we got a little closer, and we drove up and came to what is now the corner of University in California. And we got out and opened a ranch gate, which is barbed wire fence, opened a barbed wire fence and drove up a rutted road that the grass cleaned up the bottom of the car as we went up to a point. And I could see that there were buildings that looked like they were maybe 4 to 6 feet out of the ground. And that was my first close view of what it looked like. I listened to him talk. This person, Edward Steinhaus, was a visionary. He decided that it was time to change the entire structure of biological sciences. Biological sciences at that time was organized around whether things are plants or animals, big animals or small animals, big plants, small plants, departments of that kind. And he said, no, it's time to change all of that. It has to be organized around levels of analysis. And so you start with molecular biology and biochemistry, and you go to developmental biology, and all the way up to population biology with what he called psychobiology in the middle. And he called it psychobiology, invented the term because he wanted every department to have a last name of biology. We've changed it to neurobiology and behavior because that's a more modern thing in recent years. So this was truly visionary, and it is now the case that almost every university in the world is organized in that way, and before that it was not. So this campus right here, Edward Steinhaus, changed the organization of the research and teaching of biological sciences. It started here, and you can see his name on the building, Steinhaus Hall, over in the Biological Sciences Plaza. So I came here because I wanted to be part of what was going to be one of the greatest universities in the world, supported by a very forward-looking state and regents who saw clearly that education is an investment, not a cost. Very, very critical idea. I don't know how many of you think about it at the moment, but it's an investment with huge payoff, not just to the individual, but to society. And that's what it's about. And I wanted to be part of that. So I moved here and became founding chair and did all of those other things that were mentioned in the introduction. I may get back to some of those. Now, how did I get here? So I was told that people who give this talk say something about their backgrounds. I didn't just wake up one day and find myself at the University of Oregon. There is a history, and I'll give you a little bit of the history. I grew up in southern Arizona, Nogales, Arizona. Have any of you ever been to Nogales? It's on the border, about 70 miles south of Tucson. And my father was a Protestant minister. Both of my parents were college educated, and the house was just full of books. And for the first 9 years of my life, we lived in whatever luxury you can have if you live in a parsonage, and if you're forced to go to church every Sunday, which was not my favorite thing to do. So life was decent. We moved to Southern California, to Riverside, and then my father died. Actually, he committed suicide. So I lost my father, and we went into poverty when I was 9 years old. Now, don't feel sorry for me, because I learned something which is a very, very important message. I learned when I was 9 years old that if there's something that I need, if there's something that I want to do, there is one person who is responsible for that, and that's me. And that was the best lesson that I could have learned, and I still believe it, and I appreciate everything that happened. So let me give you just a couple of examples. Some of them are funny. I actually, when I was very young, shined shoes on the street. I actually sold newspapers on the street. And I had my best day when I was just short of 10 years old. My very best day, I sold 100 newspapers. It was my first dollar. I got a penny for each one. And I thought we should have an event like this every year to do it. A very important event. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. So the Pearl Harbor attack was big news, newspapers sold, and I made $1. I also made a lot of money because I had newspaper routes, and I saw that between Riverside and Corona, some of you have driven on the 55, off on the side they had camps where soldiers who were going to the Pacific War sat for the few weeks before they were sent off on ships. So this was their last station, and they were closed in. They couldn't get out at all. So I figured out that these folks needed things. So I would sneak into the camp, and I would sell them candy, and I would sell them needles and thread and all kinds of things like that at a markup. And I actually made quite a bit of money for, at that time, say a 9 and 10-year-old kid taking care. And I said it really was welfare. I was doing a service. That's how I justified it. And I went to high school, And throughout all of my schooling, I worked after school. I always had a job. I had some difficult jobs, some good jobs. I worked in a machine shop for a long period of time, and actually in the machine shop, after hours, I modified my bicycle. I bought a small gasoline motor, tore out the bottom part of the bicycle, put the motor in there, and made myself a motorized bicycle that would go about 45 miles an hour. And that was my transportation. Little things like that. You know, if you want to get around in life, you have to do it yourself. So if I want to go fast, I had to, and I became a mechanic. I found a car abandoned in an orange grove, and I bought it for $40. It had a big sign on the front of it that said Bonnie Blue Eyes. So I drove this Bonnie Blue Eyes. After I got tires for it, repaired the engine, and I learned how to take out transmissions and rear ends and all of that. I mean, you had to do that in those days, and I did it. And my point I'm making is I never regretted it. I'm not giving you a sad story. I'm giving you a happy story. It was a good thing. I learned how to do all of these things. So I'll back up a little bit. When I was 7 years old, I had a terrible illness. I had brucellosis, or what's called undulant fever. It's a disease you don't see very much, but every bison in Yellowstone has this illness. And it can be transmitted by milk. I don't know exactly how I got it, but I was bedridden, and I was told that I would have brucellosis the rest of my life. And so I was introduced to people who had brucellosis, who were invalids, because I said, you have to get used, that's what's going to happen. Now, to make a long story short, it only lasted a year because the first miracle drug came along, which is sulfanilamide. That was before the other miracle drugs that came. And I was treated with it. I was in an experimental group that came through southern Arizona, and I got the drug. I was not in the control group, fortunately, and 2 weeks later I was back in school. But during that year, I didn't have anything to do. There was no television in those days, so I read. And I studied spelling, and I studied arithmetic, and all of these things. All by myself for a year. And so when I went back to school after I was well the next year, I was way ahead of the class. and I was way ahead of the class for about 4 years, less and less as the years went on because I was basically lazy. But in the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grades, I was the best person in class. And I had an opponent. There was another guy in the class that I was in competition with, and sometimes he would beat me, and it always bothered me. I wonder where he is right now. Well, I was a really very good student, but once again, I owed that to a considerable degree to brucellosis. That is, if I hadn't have had that disease, I wouldn't have gotten so far ahead in reading and spelling and arithmetic and so on, because that's all I had to do when I was ill for that year. So, when I was in the 5th grade, a man came through class and had a bunch of musical instruments. And I decided that I was going to play the clarinet. I'd never seen one before, but it looked like a reasonable thing to do. So I rented one, and I joined the high school band. And to make a long story short, I played it all the way through junior high school, through college, through graduate school. And even today, I play in a concert band, a swing band, and a jazz band. Last night I had a 4-hour rehearsal, 2 hours of concert band and 2 hours of swing band. And on Sunday, I'll be playing with a jazz group up in the park in the University Hills. And a week ago, a jazz group I played with played for the 50th anniversary in the School of Physical Sciences. So something I started in the 5th grade has lingered on and is something that I keep as a very important hobby. In high school, I developed a strong, and in junior high, I developed a strong interest in drama and music. And I maintained that in high school. I played in the band, I played in the orchestra, I played in the opera orchestra in the city. I played in the All Southern California High School Band. I was not only an actor in the drama, but also I was a director. I got to direct the big play at the senior play when I was a senior in high school. So when I was thinking about what to do after I graduated, I had no pressure to go to college because we had no money in the family. So I just decided what I was going to do. I was going to go to college and maybe major in music or drama, and I'll go. So I got on a bus, and I went to San Jose State College, then it was called, and I enrolled. And there was no tuition, and I enrolled. And I enrolled as a drama major, but I also joined the chorus, and I joined the band and all of that. But then something happened. See, I had this background in music and drama, but I went to a college that required me to take a lot of other stuff. And I had to take literature, and I had to take genetics, and I had to take anthropology, and I had to take lots of stuff. And I found out what college was really like. It was not training you to do something that you thought you might like to do, but rather is to open the vista, a cornucopia, to let me know what was possible in the world. And I wanted to major in everything. Every time I took a class, it was better than the last class. And then I finally took a class from a very, very boring teacher on a very, very interesting topic. And that was what we then called physiological psychology, brain and behavior. And it was really, the lecture was very boring. Very nice man, but very boring. But the content was what made it exciting. And by the time I was a junior, I decided I was going to be a professor. That's what I was going to do. I was going to do so well that I'd be able to get in graduate school and I'd become a professor. I didn't know really what a professor did, by the way, but stood up there and taught us, and the stuff was really very interesting. So I did well in college. You've already heard that. I studied hard. Despite the fact, and this is very important, I worked my way through college. I had no money. All the money I had was whatever I earned. But I could do it because there was no tuition. There was no tuition. If there'd been $10 tuition, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So what did I do? Well, I got a job stacking bottles for a Coca-Cola company. They went out, distributed, came back with empty bottles. I would load up new ones for the next day. I worked in a bakery. I had to go to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock. I worked in a chicken ranch for a year, cutting chickens' heads off Saturday morning. And my best job, I got a job as a psychiatric technician in a mental hospital, and I worked from 12 midnight to 8 in the morning. And that was, I don't know when I slept. I think about that from time to time. I wonder, when did I sleep? And I don't remember. But it was good because I had, of the 8 hours at the psychiatric hospital, I could study for at least 4. And so I used that for study time. And so I worked 8 hours a day and went to college. You couldn't do that today. You couldn't do that today. My point is, I would not be standing here if the state of California had not said a long time ago that education is an investment, not a cost. I wouldn't be here, and neither would, I would guess, at least a third of the faculty that you know on this campus, maybe more. That's just a rough guess.
Well, I went to UCLA free.
Yeah.
Like you.
Well, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get exactly.
And I keep saying I paid the state of California a gazillion for it.
That's exactly my next point. So in 1964, I've given you my background. Oh, I skipped it. I'll just finish it up. I went to Berkeley. I loved it for graduate school. I started the research that I now work on, continue to work on. I started it when I was a graduate student in Berkeley. I was subsequently awarded a fellowship to study with a Nobel Prize winner in Rome, Italy. His name was Daniel Beauvais, and I went to Rome to study. And I learned that Daniel Beauvais received the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the drug that cured my disease when I was in the 2nd grade. Daniel Beauvais won the Nobel Prize for that. He also discovered antihistamines, in case you've ever taken an antihistamine. He developed a drug which when modified, became Thorazine, which is the first drug, antipsychotic drug, and so on. I worked with him. That was a big thing for me. Now, when I came to UCI, there was no tuition. I came in 1964. In 1968, Ronald Reagan became governor. And I know we revere, respect, and frequently call out the name of the great Ronald Reagan, who did so many wonderful things for us. One of the wonderful things he did for us was to say immediately, we must impose tuition in the university. And he worked very hard to try to impose tuition in the university, partly because he was angry at the students. There was a student revolt. You may know about a history of a revolt starting in Berkeley. Students got very agitated. Actually, it was started by right-wing Goldwater supporters, but it built into a big conflagration, and it really annoyed Ronald Reagan, so he wanted to punish the students, and he wanted to put in a tuition. Well, the regents wouldn't go along with it, but Ronald Reagan put in fees. He put in fees, right? Everybody knew that that was another word for tuition. And once you put in a fee, then whenever there's a problem in supporting the university, the governor and the regents can turn and say, well, you can solve the problem. You need more money? Raise it, right? In place of looking at the university as an investment, it turns it on its head and say, now the university is a cost. Oh, it's a burden to the state. Look at the cost of the state. I mean, for heaven's sake, and all those students are benefiting from this. They should share in it, so let's put in a fee. And then the fee became a tuition, and it went from $400 to $1,500 to $4,400 to whatever it is at the present time. But the underlying assumption of this is that it's not a benefit to the state, it's just a benefit to the student, so let them find a way to do it. It's just topsy-turvy. It just turns it on its head. When I was executive vice chancellor here in 1974 to 1982, the state of California provided approximately 34% of the money to run the university. Now, it actually, in terms of for the educational part of it, it's even more than that, because the university runs housing, it does lots of things that the state shouldn't pay. So it was largely paying for the operation of the university, 34%. Guess, don't say it out loud, but think for a moment, what do you think it is right now? Think of a number. If you think 9%, you're correct. That's what it does. Of all of the things that we do here, 9% of the costs are provided by the state. It was about double that just 3 or 4 years ago. Then we had a recession, and that gave further opportunity for the state to cut the money of the university, and it hasn't come back. And there's no plan for it to come back. It's now locked in at a lower level, which is about 9%. With any luck, it could go up to 10%. So that's what's on my mind. What is it that I think about? What is it that bothers me? Is this topsy-turvy view. When you look at what higher education has done just for my life, you know, what matters to me. You asked me to talk about what matters to me, so I'm telling you. And you now look what is happening to you if you're a student. You could. It would be impossible for you to work your way through college today because you couldn't make enough money to pay for what you need. It's out of the question. Out of the question. It's up to you. I mean, after all, it's your life. You have to pay for it. You're not a benefit for society. Now, think about the unintended consequences of this. I told you, when I went to college, I thought I was a drama and music major, sort of, just because I was interested in that. But I could do anything. I could choose to do anything. And I didn't have to think about how much money am I going to make afterwards. That never entered my mind. I just thought, well, I'll get a job doing something. Well, throughout the United States, the average debt for going to college for all students is $20,000 when they finish. That's just the average debt. My guess it's probably higher here. So that means that when you first graduate, you've got to get a job and then start paying off a debt when you have a low income to begin with. And then from a point of view of economics, you're a drag on the economy because the amount of money that you make as a salary, you should go out and buy things. And if you buy things, you pay taxes, and that's the way it works, you see. You get a salary, you buy things, you pay taxes, and the state gets it, and the state can do things. Now, the state says, I won't pay for your education, therefore you have to borrow money, then you have to pay that back, and you're not buying that car, you're not buying that house because of the debt service that you have. Everything has gotten backwards in the past 20 years or so because of that. So what matters to me very, very deeply, aside from my research, and if we have time, you can ask me questions about that. But what matters for me is that through the actions of imposing tuition and the inactions of correcting that situation, we have created a very difficult situation in the United States for higher education. We have made it a cost. We have come to believe as a society that it is a cost. We have lost sight of the very important view that education at all levels is represented as an investment, not a cost. Now let's back away for a moment. Has anybody decided that high school students should pay tuition to go to high school? Public high school? No. Has anybody said that kids in grade school should pay a tuition to go to grade school? No. Why then? What is the rationale for the arbitrary decision that if you start this other level, all of a sudden you have to pay for it? I don't understand that. It is completely irrational and it's uneconomic. Even if you don't have a bleeding heart for higher education and just think of economic principles alone, you'd say the best thing we can do is to invest in students so that they will achieve, make lots of money, pay high taxes, and make the economy grow. Even if you didn't give a damn about the university. From a pure raw economic perspective, you'd say make it an investment. But the very people who should have that view are the ones who are saying, no, charge the students. I mean, after all, it's to their benefit, so let's make those costs go directly to the students as best get. I'm getting a signal over here. See, I was just getting wrapped up, you see. Actually, this is a good time for me to say that I have appreciated the invitation to come here, and I've appreciated the opportunity to talk about something that usually I never talk about. That is, this is not something that I've never talked about this before. This is just something that lives in my head and boils around from time to time. As you can see, I am very enthusiastic about these issues, and I hope that some of you in here will be motivated to do something about it. That is, we need to make a change in our culture, we need to make a change in our state, and we need to get people to rethink what it is the higher education is all about and why it's such a benefit to society, not just a benefit to the individual. So thank you, and I'll take questions.
This is being recorded, and so if you have a question, I wish you do, please use the microphone and speak into it clearly. So,
thank you very much for that incredibly inspiring talk that I agree 100% with. My question is, how do you feel your background in the arts influenced your career in research in terms of creative thinking and ability to look at problems from many different angles?
Well, I looked at it in a somewhat different perspective. People have asked me repeatedly, do I ever have stage fright? I give lots of talks, and internationally and all of that. And I have friends who tell me, I vomit before every talk. Well, that went out of me by the time I was in junior high because I performed so much, and that was important. But it also gave me a perspective on how to look at things. I mean, after all, I could, when I was in high school, I could get up in the morning, I'd go to school, after school I'd go to my work, and that evening I would play on the opera orchestra. It gave me a broad perspective of how to integrate art into my life, and it always has. I've always been involved. I left out a lot of stuff. For several years I was a church choir director, if you can believe that. That just fit that. Actually, I did it even when I was in college. Part of my job was a church choir director. I just fit in the arts into what I did, and it just became natural in doing it. And as I say, I had a 4-hour rehearsal last night, and I should have been working on a talk for today, but and maybe it shows. I'm sorry. Sorry. It's seamless, but I think the only thing that I regret in all of this is that I had to give up drama because it's very time consuming if you're in a play or that, and so I had to back that. But I do go to a lot of dramatic production. I just feel that it's part of it. My stereo is half of the time on classical music and about a third of the time on music of the 40s. I mean, it's just, what can I say? I can't differentiate my background in art. If you take drama and music as part of that, I can't differentiate that from what I ordinarily do. I just can't.
It just seems a shame they cut the arts so in elementary school and high school as a way to save money.
Well, try to find a strong music program any place, and I had the advantage. I sang in the Pacific Chorale here. I was very fortunate. Remember, I was studying science. But a baritone just retired from the Metropolitan Opera who came as our voice teacher, and I studied voice with this person for 2 years and did some professional singing also. And so that my life has always been mixed up with that, and I think it's wonderful, And I could have gone in that direction. I could have. I don't think I would have been any good at it, but I could have gone in that direction because I loved it so much. So I think that these kinds of things should be part of all of our lives, and we should not have to give them up. I see in many students such a straight line emphasis on doing well to get into some professional school and so on, that they miss out on the opportunity to be influenced by these other. I did all of that, and it didn't seriously harm me in any way that I can see, and besides that, it was a lot of fun.
Jim, I'm older than you, but this happens to be my biggest worry too. It's funny, I didn't know it was yours. The only way that's going to change is government has got to realize that this is a benefit to them, okay? I don't think anything else is going to change that. I don't know of any legislators where this is a big issue. So how do you convince, have you ever written a column or something like that?
No.
How do we ought to get it on 60 Minutes. I mean, I think
Been there.
But maybe they take you back again. The thing is that I feel this so strongly because I went to UCLA for nothing. But how do you convince legislators that it's in their interest to change this? I don't think that's the only way it can be changed.
No, there's another way to fix it. There is at least a reasonable chance that someone or ones of you in this room will end up in government. Why not? Right? So I'm starting early. You say? I'm starting early. We need to have people who get into the legislature who will have these views. We need to influence the governor. Unfortunately, we have a governor who is very good in many respects, but he's a little bit haughty. He went to the University of California, Berkeley, but he doesn't share all of the values that I've expressed here. It's sort of, well, you know, it's a nice place, but you know, they have a lot of advantage there, and I'm going to worry about other things. And many of the other things he worries about are very important to worry about. I understand that. But we need to have more people in the legislature and in other places in government who will adopt this very simple view. This is not hard. I was going to say it's not brain science, but that's what I do. Education is an investment. That's it. That's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need to do anything else, and everything that you do should flow from that. Thousands of decisions, big and small, will come from understanding this very basic premise. It's an investment. That's all it is. It's an investment in humans. It's an investment in ideas. We need to have students come to the university with a flexible idea of what they're going to do. And you need to study literature. You need to study art. You need to study mathematics. You need to study science. All of these things. I mean, I felt so blessed. I had a cornucopia. Because I didn't have an ultimate goal, I could study anything I want to, and I did. And it was wonderful. You know, I could take this course, this course, this course, this course. And I didn't feel that I had to do only this because I had this final thing as what I was going to become. What I became was an outgrowth of all of that. I think that in designing things for the future, of course we need engineers, but we need people who understand world literature. We need to have people who understand the big ideas of the past. We need to have people who've studied philosophy. I mean, after all, ideas of today were not invented today. Many of them were invented thousands of years ago. And how did they stand up? And what were the arguments that were being made? And so on. We need to have students who are not burdened by trying to figure out how they're going to pay for tuition when they get out of college, not burdened by that, so they can afford to take courses that are mind-expanding and are not directly leading to accumulating a dollar bill at the later time. And we need to have universities in which the faculty and the staff and the administrators can spend their time worrying about how to have the best university for students and not spending their time trying to figure out how to make a lot of money on the side to make it work. And we're in an era where university administrators have to spend an enormous amount of their time fundraising. Why? To make up for the money that was taken away when the view of a university being an investment as opposed to a cost when that shift changed. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but...
I agree with that.
Oh, there's plenty of time for more questions and comments.
This question here.
Thank you for the wonderful lecture. Dr. Cahill would always mention you as our intellectual grandfather.
Father would have been better, but...
He considered himself as our father, so... My question would be, how would you suggest we as a student make the mind shift of education as the investment in ourselves, as opposed to the cost of like worrying about all our careers and future lives and how much we're going to make in the future?
Well, I have a view which probably would not be accepted by a lot of people, and that is that I think students ought to spend more time thinking about what they are really interested in and what they think they might really like to do and spread the wings and so on, and less about, I've got to do this in order to do that, to do this, to do that, and so on. Frankly, I just see too many students who are driven like this because at the end of it, they have to make a living and have to start paying back. Take a gamble. Take a gamble. Take that course that is not directly in line of your major and let it expand your mind. Maybe there are opportunities there. You may be interested in engineering and find out that the important thing about engineering, that it broadens your view and you can understand how to deal with water, for example, or how to do with solar energy or something in which the technical details that you're learning in engineering may be less important than learning something about it which will enable you to have an impact on society. I mean, just open up the view a little bit. You know, take a chance, take a course that you might really be interested in that is not directly related to your major and that you can't see that is going to give you a dollar bill later on, but it might. It might move you in a direction that will even be better for you. You know, I was a big fan of not having students declare a major until the junior year. And that used to be popular many years ago. Why? Because you can search around and get a match then between what you're really capable of doing and what you're interested in. And these days we lock people in. You come in, you are an X major, and you take these courses and so on. I didn't do that, and I didn't exactly fail. I mean, I don't know how well I did, but I didn't, you know, maybe I could have done better if somebody told me exactly what to do along the way, but I don't think so. I don't think so. So my view is that you ought to take a few risks and move out into some areas and take a look and see, and not always be aimed at saying I'm going to owe X amount of dollars when I get out of here and I have to make sure I'm well positioned to get that job. Remember, most people are not going to have that same job very long anyway. The facts are the people these days are going to change their jobs 3 or 4 times a year in their career. So why are you spending the best times of your life worried about a specific job outcome when the likelihood is you're not going to be doing that anyway?
Hi, Professor. First, I want to thank you for starting this university, which has been a total incredible blessing in my life. I was very ill for a while, and I had time off, and I started reading on the couch and became interested in neurobiology. And because I was really poor from being sick, I was able to come here tuition-free. And I feel guilty about that sometimes because I see how art students work, and there's a big push on campus now to career development and what you're going to do after. And I'm in a great position because I've studied your work with Larry Cahill in the fine detail and neurobiology and actually biological psychology and the biology of the brain and how it affects behavior is something that just fascinates me, and I'm in a position to be able to do a lot of studying and here at this great university. And so I'm in a great position where I'm actually able to study what I'm interested in. And I'm wondering, I know your talk is about this exact topic. I'm so happy I'm here. So my question is, isn't it true that in the California State Constitution that higher education is supposed to be free for all in-state citizens?
It wasn't in the Constitution. It was in the founding of the University of California in 1868. I think it was land-grant university. Actually, Abraham Lincoln made the land-grant universities possible, and Berkeley was one of those. It specified that the tuition might be imposed. It said right in the founding of it, but they didn't want to have tuition at all, so it should be free to all qualified students. And that was right in the opening statement of it. And it was free until 1968 when, quote, fees were put in. Everybody knew what a fee was. It just wasn't called tuition because Ronald Reagan worked hard to try to get a tuition imposed, and that was rejected by the regents. They wouldn't put in a tuition. So Ronald Reagan put in fees. And of course what happened is the fees got larger and larger, and finally somebody says, okay, it's tuition. That's what happened. But I have to say honestly that in the founding of the University of California, it was stated that tuition would be possible. But at the time they said there will be no tuition. They had both of those statements in the founding of the university. I was not there. I missed it by a couple of years because that was in 1887.
We have time for one more question. Don't be shy. Well, please give a warm thank
No, we got one here. Oh, hold it. We have a question here. Hold it.
Thank you, Dr. McGaugh. That was an amazing talk. Just on the topic we've been speaking about most, do you think we could learn a lot looking at other countries? I know France and Germany and other European countries that I know of do have free higher
Yes.
education.
Yeah.
Do you think we should maybe look at how their tax system is working or different things that we could learn from these other countries?
Yeah, I think so. You're absolutely correct. Most of the European countries, higher education is free. And in some countries, you just enroll. There's no prior qualification for it. In others, there happens to be. Yes, I think we can look at that in the same way that we should look at other countries for their health, for example. We have a very, very strange health thing. If you go to England and you get sick, you're taken care of, and there's never a bill. Now we have an improved situation with what's called Obamacare, but it's still complicated. I mean, the easiest thing would be to say, you get public health. I mean, that's easy, isn't it? You're sick, you get cared for, right? And the caring for is paid for in the taxes, right? I mean, I don't know what's complicated about that. Well, yes, I do know what's complicated, unfortunately, about that. Higher education, we have a compromise view here, and many of the European countries get it right. They see it as an investment, and an investment that pays off mightily, because if you go to a university, your average income over a lifetime is something like $300,000 or $400,000 more than the income would have been without it, and all you have to do is do a calculation of how much taxes would be paid on that, and you can see that the higher education is completely paid for. But it's a very different view from that to saying, you ingrates. You kids, you're basically teenagers and you want to spend our money, so you're going to spend your own damn money to go to college. It's going to be a cost to you, and I hope you benefit from it. You see that? That's one view. And the other view is society needs to have people who are well educated and broadly educated. We know that it pays off, and most European countries understand that, and we are behind them in that respect, and we're getting worse. We're getting worse.
Well, we're at that point. A couple things before we close. First, complete your surveys and turn them in. Put your lunch items in the receptacles. And please check our website for our next speaker in the series. And let's give a warm thank you to Professor